He lived under constant attack. What they had not accomplished when he was a child, they sought to now finish. Through his adversity, he learned to fight, and fight well. The more he fought, the more his powers grew. I mean, crap, man. Look at that. That's like his stomach plug on the ground back there. You don't see that every day. I mean, that doesn't really even seem possible if you think about it. With body organs and cartilage and bones and, I mean, I'm no doctor, but it was like one clean chunk.
Hey everybody, it's Tyler the Fro here, and this week we're going over one of the other decks that I'm considering for Nationals. This is going to be my Beelzemon list that I've been playing recently at Locals. It's got pretty good matchups across the board against some of the more popular decks out there like Metal Guru, Mon-X, Bloom Lord Mon, even aggro decks like D-Brigade. The big reason I'm considering testing this deck out right now is because, well, it doesn't really gain anything in BT11. That also means that I'm able to lock in my numbers and my ratios early and keep testing those rather than going back and forth, constantly second guessing myself over, do I run 2 copies of this, 1 copy of this, how do I slot in all these new cards? This list is pretty much as is. So without further ado, let's just get down into the breakdown. We've got 4 copies of Pagumon for our eggs. This is the starter deck, so on deletion you trash the top 2 cards of your deck. Beelzemon is all about trashing the top card of your deck and getting effects from, say, your Impmons or your Beelzemons that trigger when they're milled. This is probably the best Pagumon that we have access to. I've considered running the other purple Pagumon for the on attack mill trigger, because with this style deck we're really going to be attacking more than hoping our thing dies. But it's a nice little safety net just so that we always get triggers no matter what, because they are going to be trying to kill our Beelzemon as much as they can. Next up for our rookie package, it's a pretty straightforward 12 rookies. We've got Impmon, and of course, surprise surprise, we've got Impmon. First up, we've got our BT6 Impmon. This is very straightforward, on play, trash a card from your hand, and it's always going to grab a Beelzemon, so it's really good for constantly having access to anything that you may have accidentally trashed. And that way there's some turns where if you've got 3 memory, you can play an Impmon, grab a Beelzemon, and warp right into it. So it's a very, very useful tool for recycling your own resources. So setting up your resources in your trash, we've got the BT2 Impmon. So this is just very simple, on deletion, trash 3 cards. Probably one of our best enablers, and it's the thing that you always want to put on top of your Pagumon, because you turn 1, Digivolve into that, check in, and it's going to die because it's got 1k. And then you filled up your trash with 5 more cards, and that means you're halfway to warping into Beelzemon. Lastly, we've got the real star of the show in this rookie package, EX03 Impmon. So this one, when you mill it, if it's through an effect that isn't another EX03 Impmon, you mill 3 more cards. This is really good for chaining and setting up your trash and getting to the very crucial 10 card threshold. More importantly, on play, this one we can actually use the on play effect as opposed to our Beelzemon list. Reveal your top 4 cards, and then you can add a Beelzemon and an Iron Mako from those 4 cards to your hand, put the rest on the bottom. This deck is really at its peak when it has access to the Iron Mako, so being able to dig 4 cards to find it is very important. And then it's got a very crucial inheritable effect of when this Digimon has Beelzemon in its name, it gets plus 3k DP. As far as level 6s go, Beelzemon being 11k is generally on the smaller side, it's on the weaker side. So getting this thing up to 14k lets it swing over pretty much anything in the game. Next up for our champions, our good old level 4s, we've got 4 copies of Dobermon, 4 copies of the promo Wizardmon, and a single Kaiser Leomon. With the Dobermons, this is another very useful tool for setting up your trash, and for recycling your resources. On deletion, you trash the top 3 cards of your deck, and you grab any purple Digimon or purple Tamer from your trash and put it back in your hand. So it lets you recycle your Iron Makos, it lets you recycle your Impmons, it lets you dig up pretty much anything that you need. So you always want to just send this into the red zone and hope that the thing dies. The promo Wizardmon, you're really using this for its mill trigger, so when it's milled, you gain a memory. This is often the difference between passing the turn after warping into a Beelzemon and being able to warp into a Beelzemon and then still attack. As well, if you decide to use it as a Digivolution chain, it has very useful inheritable, so when attacking, you can reveal a purple card from your hand and put it on top of your deck, so this way you can recycle any mill trigger in your hand. You want to mill more cards with an EX2 Impmon. If you just have another copy of Wizardmon and you want to gain some more memory, it's a very useful tool for setting up those plays. Lastly, we have one copy of Kaiser Leomon as a hybrid for game. For 2 memory, it can digivolve over any of your tamers, so your Iron Makos. So it's very good for just, I've got an empty board, digivolve, check in, and win on the spot. But more importantly, this one also has the option to digivolve over one of your champions for 1 memory, which conveniently goes over this Wizardmon. So if you ever want to set up this inheritable for super cheap, you just spend 1 memory, digivolve on top, check in, and you set up your next combo play. For our level 5s, it's a very sparse package of just 4 copies of the BT10. So this guy, on attacking, you can trash up to 3 cards from your top of your deck. Very useful for just stacking your trash as fast as possible. But more importantly, on deletion, if you have 10 or more cards in your trash, you can play 1 Beelzemon from your trash without paying its memory cost. I've often just like swung this into bigger Digimon just so I can get this on deletion, because this way it helps always keep a Beelzemon in play. Because that's pretty much how you're going to win the game, is always have a Beelzemon in play so you can swing in, activate Iron Mako, and then go into blast mode and just keep that train going. Like, this effect is so good that often I will just like hard play slam this down for the full 7 cost and just kind of dare my opponent to destroy it, because like this, like the Impmon, like the Dobermon, this is another thing where I don't care if it dies. So I'm just going to keep checking in with this thing, setting up my trash, and if it happens to die, cool, awesome, good, I want that to happen. Then for the star of the show, we're running 8 copies of Beelzemon. We've got 4 of the EX2, 3 of the BT2, and 1 copy of the BT10. This is kind of the linchpin of the deck for always making sure that you have something in play. So on mill, you put an Impmon from your trash back into play, and it's worth noting that this will trigger any on-play effects, so you can grab an EX2 Impmon from your trash, put this into play, and then dig 4 more cards for the Iron Mako. As well, if you actually manage to build up a stack with this guy, when digivolving or when attacking, you may mill 2 cards and then delete one of your opponent's level 3 Digimon. For every 10 cards in your trash, you add 1 level to this effect. So if your opponent has a smaller board, you can build up into this Beelzemon, digivolve, kill off a thing, swing in, mill 2 more cards, kill off another thing, and suddenly you've just swung the entire tempo in your favor. I'm running 3 copies of the BT2 Warp Beelzemon. So for this one, if I have 10 or more cards in my trash, I can digivolve onto any of my Impmon in play for a cost of 4. And then when digivolving, I can delete an opponent's level 4 Digimon. This is a very useful tool for just going, say I mill this, hit an Impmon, put 1 into play, then just go directly onto a Beelzemon, and suddenly I've got a level 6 in play. It eliminates the need for clogging up the deck with too many level 5s. It eliminates the need to always have to have something set up in breeding. I can always just go play a thing, and then if I've got an Iron Mako in play, I can just hard play an Impmon and then immediately digivolve over onto this, pop an opponent's level 4 Digimon, and then suddenly I'm threatening a blast mode anytime I need to. Lastly, I've got one BT10 Beelzemon as like a tech card. I've run some shells where I've just used 4 copies of Warp Beelzemon, but against swarming decks like Blue Mord or D Brigade, this has been a very, very useful card. Because on play or digivolving, I may trash the top 3 cards of my deck, and then for every 10 cards in my trash, I delete one of my opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, so if my opponents are trying to go wide, I can just hard play this or digivolve into this and just wipe their board. As well, unlike the other 2 level 6s, this one actually does have an inheritable effect. So when I go into the blast mode, at the end of my attack, once per turn for every 10 cards in my trash, I gain a memory. So if I, say, have this in play, start my turn at 3 memory with Iron Mako, I can check in with this, activate Iron Mako, digivolve in a blast mode for 3, gain all that memory back, and then I can just keep playing more things. So this is just a very useful card. I'm still testing the ratio between these two. If the metagame shifts away from bigger decks, I may end up going like a 2-2 split, but for now I'm finding the 3-1 is more than sufficient, especially because I have so many ways of getting this thing back into my hand. Lastly, for Digimon, we've got 3 copies of Beelzemon Blast Mode. This is pretty much the only reason you're playing this deck. So when you mill this, you delete a level 4 lower Digimon, which is super good for just swinging tempo. On Digivolving, you delete all of your opponent's Digimon at the highest level, so if they're trying to go a little bit bigger stacks, like if they have a Blue Mord and they accelerate into a Hydra, you can just Digivolve into this, pop them both. And more importantly, this effect also hits level 7s. If they've got, say, a Death X, you can Digivolve into this, pop their Death X, and away you go. So, what makes this deck super scary and why you always want to have this thing in play is because on your turn, it gets security +1 for every 10 cards in your trash. So if you have 30 cards in your trash, this is coming in for 4 checks on its own at 15k. If we have the EX02 Impmon underneath as a source, it's coming in for 18k, which is bigger than everything in the game. People really aren't running too many removal options right now, so Blast Mode coming in for 18k is pretty much the same thing as having a Garurumon X underneath. Like, it's a pure protection, and as well, if it dies, it's not the end of the world, because thanks to our tamers, I and Mako, as long as we have a Beelzemon in play, we can always just keep bringing back Blast Mode. Iron Mako is a memory setter, and then on your turn, whenever one of your Digimon attacks, you can suspend it to trash the top card of your deck, and then if that you can Digivolve into a Blast Mode for a Digivolution cost of 3, which is half of its normal price. Suffice to say, this card is absolutely insane. I always want to have this in play at all times, and playtesting, the difference between having this in play and not having it is backbreaking. Like, this is like the linchpin of the entire deck. So there are often times where if I'm torn between grabbing my first Iron Mako or another Digimon out of the trash off of a Dobermon, I'm grabbing Iron Mako every single time. This card lets you play your Blast Modes through de-Digivolution effects, like Chikurimon Security or Death Xmon, because they'll de-Digivolve back into a Beelzemon, and then if they can't kill it, on your turn, you just do it again. You just bring the Blast Mode back from your trash, Digivolve over, pop their biggest thing, which is usually going to be that Death X, and then you're coming in for even more security checks. This card is absolutely disgusting. I've seen some lists running 3 copies, but that's just wrong. Like, you need to always see this, and you want to max out on the Iron Mako as much as you can. Lastly, that brings us to our options. We're running 4 copies of Death Slinger as our removal, 4 copies of Mist Memory Boost, and then 2 copies of Demonic Disaster. Death Slinger is one of those cards that's good no matter where it is. So if it's in security, if it's in your hand, it's just a straight removal card. So it deletes any of your opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, and then for every 10 cards in your trash, you add 1 to the effect. So if you've got 30 cards in your trash, this is 4 memory, delete a level 7. More importantly, if you mill it, you gain a memory, so it functions just like the Wizardmon. So there's some times where I'll mill 3 cards off an Impmon, hit a Deathslinger and a Wizardmon. I've got 2 more memory I can work with, so that just increases the number of things I'm able to do, decreases the number of game actions, and that's really what helps you pull ahead in a lot of the closer back and forth matchups. I've got 4 copies of the Mist Memory Boost. You gotta have your Memory Boost, and this does also help set up the turns where you warp into the BT2 Beelzemon and still be able to attack within that turn. So when you play it from your hand, you trash the top 2 cards of your deck and then draw a card, and then you can just always pop it for 2 memory. I've toyed around with cutting these down to 2, but I was finding that you always wanted to see at least 1 to set up that warp turn. Last but not least, we've got some spicy tech here. We've got 2 copies of Demonic Disaster. This is a very interesting card in that when it's in your security, it lets you play any of your Impmon back from your trash into play. You don't get to trigger any on plays, but it's really good for maintaining a board presence. It's 1 memory, sack 1 of your Digimon, and you unsuspend 1 of your purple Digimon. So where this really combos is with the blast mode. So if you're checking like 3 checks off of the blast mode, you can use Demonic Disaster, pop 1 of your other Digimon, unsuspend the blast mode, and clear out the rest of their security stack in 1 turn. It's also just a really good way of manually getting rid of 1 of your Impmons, Dobermons, or Ballmons. One thing I have tested in the past was when I was on the shell with the 2 Mist Memory Boosts. I was running 2 Memory Boosts and 4 copies of Darkness Wave, like I was running in my Beelzemon. The big reason I shied away from the Darkness Waves is, while it was very good for setting up my trash, I was finding that once a card was in my trash, I didn't really have a way of using it as frequently as I did with the Beelzemon. So I had to be a little bit more conservative with my milling. I was finding that if I whiffed on my Darkness Wave, if I didn't hit, say, the Deathslinger, the Beelzemon, the Wizardmon, or anything like that, I was just wasting those cards like they weren't actually doing anything. Whereas Darkness Wave hitting a bunch of 7-cost options in Beelzemon is perfect. That's what I want to do. It was a better use of my memory and my cards to simply slow down my milling and focus more on mill quality over quantity. So the big reason I'm considering this deck for Nats is because it has such a good matchup against decks that try to go tall. These style of decks are all about building up your stack and then winning through that. This kind of deck is very good at disrupting them at all points of them building up their chain. It's very good for just popping their level 4s before they can get up into the level 5s and level 6s. Once they have a threat down, setting up the Warp Beelzemon, Digivolve into Blast Mode and get rid of their entire stack. The Deathslingers scale as the game progresses, which is very good for keeping a lot of these stacking decks in check. And as well, it also has a lot of game against aggro decks, because we have so many ways of getting rid of level 4 or lower Digimon for basically free. It has all of these board control elements while also maintaining a board presence through milling your own Beelzemon EX02s to keep Impmons in play. It's very good at recycling your resources, which is very good for grinding out a lot of these other top tier decks, because they're very good at drawing a bunch of cards but not so much on rebuilding their stack once it's been destroyed. There's some instances where, because of the amount of memory we can gain by milling our Deathslingers and Wizardmon, we're able to perform like 4 or 5 more game actions than our opponents are able to do per turn. And that's why I think it's got a little bit more game than some of the other options that I've been looking into. So this has been Ty with the Fro. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, do all that YouTube stuff, and you have yourselves a great day.